Hey guys. A while back I asked my audience a question. What did they think of multiculturalism? Was it a fantasy, or was it a viable option, a real solution? Now since then I put a little bit of time into it, and I looked at it every way I could think, historically, modernly, philosophically, and I had some very interesting conversations with some of the people there. Some of you thought that it could work, under certain circumstances. Surely there was a place for that kind of thing. And then some of you thought it was the proper, good thing to do. And that idea was based on this premise that we do it every day, all around the world. There's the Swiss and the Americans, and we get along just swell, right? So the answer is simple. Or is it? After rolling it around in my head for a while, and really thinking about it, I just don't think it's a real viable solution. Hear me out, I'll explain that as we go on. But let's start at the beginning, shall we? A nice, generous way to describe multiculturalism is it's a peaceful coexistence and preservation of distinct cultures within the same community. Naturally, it would have to be peaceful to be any kind of solution, and it would have to be distinct, because otherwise you're probably talking about cultures who are related to each other, or maybe even spawned from each other, and those are just variants. And naturally, they have to be preserving that culture, because if it's not actually preserving the fundamentals of that culture, then that's assimilation, and assimilation is a very different beast. Oh, and of course, finally, it really needs to happen within the same community. If these cultures are just sealed away from each other, then they're just isolated. They're not intermingled, they're not involved in any way, and isolation isn't multiculturalism. So I think those are all pretty fair standards of measure. Now, we're not really going to deal with any type of related cultures or cultures that are terribly close to one another, because at that point you might as well be talking about variants. No, I'm much more interested in the moment that the unstoppable dick meets the immovable asshole. Now bear with me, that's a poor analogy. But I'm talking about the cultures with fundamental differences, where the very fabric of their being is vastly different. Now I think this can best be demonstrated with a real-world issue. Let's look at apartheid. That's the separation of sexes. It's actually quite common in many Middle Eastern cultures. But simply put, apartheid cannot coexist peacefully in a society based on individual rights, on the belief in equal rights regardless of race, sex, or creed. Period. Full stop. So there's already a pretty big wrinkle. Those two cultures cannot engage without one fundamentally being affected by the other. Because that's the rub, isn't it? Either apartheid has to be accepted by one side, or it has to be quashed in order to service the other. Because you either have the rights and liberties of free movement and association of an individual society, or you respect the idea of apartheid and have separation. There is no middle ground. They require completely different things. And now, like we said before, you can't simply push off one set of rules for apartheid onto a different area, because again, that would be isolation of culture. Now I guess you could make one simply live the life of the other, but that would be depriving it of one of its fundamental features, whichever side you chose. And to do that would not be preserving the culture at all. That would be changing it. That is, by its most generous definition, assimilation, if not complete and utter capitulation. But either way you look at it, it is simply not multiculturalism. Now, if you think that that is a fine answer, that there should be exchanges between the cultures, that's fine, that's great, I agree. But that's not multiculturalism. That is a step towards assimilation. You have not preserved that culture that you changed. That one is no longer, by fundamental needs, the same culture. Now, I understand some of you are just really interested in cultural preservation. But let me assure you, not only does it make multiculturalism impossible, it's also incredibly dumb. Cultural preservation is stupid. Culture needs to grow, needs to change, and it has to adapt. Oh god, it has to adapt. I mean, honestly, look at New York, for instance. New York seemed like a fine place, for the most part, sure. But we're all kind of glad, frankly, that they stopped calling the Irish inhuman and beating them to death. Oh, and fuck you, California. I hear you back there already. I don't want you getting all uppity, because I know your dirty laundry. A lot of you are douches now, but at least you've cooled off on the whole fucking eugenics thing. Oh, and don't blame Hitler or the Times for that one, because you guys were still forcing sterilizations on people well into the 60s. Clearly, sometimes it's a good thing that cultures move forward, that societies change. I know some of you really want to fight me on the idea of the isolation thing or preservation, but you honestly don't have to look far to find out how cultural isolation within the same nation can be damaging. Keeping yourself from the blood flow, from the heart of the nation, because you want to retain old values, it is just traditionalism by a different name. Isolation of cultures will inevitably lead to violence and malnourishment of that very culture. No man is an island, and all that jazz. And don't get me wrong, this is not mutually exclusive to Muslim issues. We have these issues, these embracing of terrible fundamental ideas throughout our society. Look at urban culture. Yes, urban culture. It is poison. It is toxic. I grew up in not such a great place, when I was a kid. And I can tell you, apart from some very extreme religions, I don't think I've seen another culture with more disdain for education and intellectual pursuit than urban culture. Hashtag not all, but large amounts of them are encouraged to ignore intellectual pursuit in the favor of the glorious, the fabulous, just on a grade school level even. Don't get me wrong, I'm gonna shit on the South too. There are real dangers to being that xenophobic and that unwilling to break from tradition. I don't even begin to believe in progress just for the sake of progress, but there is a nice happy medium. Somewhere between capitulating to every other culture and choosing to be completely immobile. Somewhere between those two is where we move forward, where we get better, become better. But the expectation of multiculturalism is not that way. But I think you get the picture now. Well, that's what I could really come up with myself. What do you guys think? Did I miss something big? Did I give you guys anything to really think about? I hope so. Because something like this is going to be very important, especially going forward. Well, that's everything for tonight, folks. Oh, and sorry about the lack of content lately. I've been working with a lot of things on my plate, and I've actually been trying to work on different types of content for you guys. You'll probably see those. Also, I have a guest video coming out on a larger channel. Hopefully, I'll be able to point that to you guys soon. Oh, and if I don't see you guys until after, Merry Christmas. What's that? Porch atheist? You know what? I'm pro-porch, being from the South and all, Have you ever seen a person on the porch? They're always happy. And if they're sad, I assure you, they are much sadder off the porch. But that's it, guys. I'll catch you later. Goodbye. Hey, everyone. If you like that show, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want me to make more content, hit the subscribe button. That way I know I'm just not, singing to an empty theater, that kind of thing. Goodbye.